To read the Bible in a year, you need 30 minutes to listen or read and 5 days each week. Join us here at St.Andrews for Bible in a Year.
Seeing is a big thing at the beginning of 2 Kings, right? Elisha asks that he would have a double portion of Elijah's spirit.
And if he is to see Elijah taken up to heaven, it will be granted. There's a piece about that story.
There's many. Which one are you thinking of?
Just the mantle passing.
I like that part.
The work continues, and the physical mantle passing, but just God's work continues even if you're not there.
Yeah. Yeah, that parallel where Elijah strikes, uses his mantle and strikes the water and it parts. And then Elisha is going back across the Jordan. He does the same thing and the water parts. And it's like, so right away he gets to know, okay, God is with me. And there is more work to do back across the river.
Mm-hmm. So, and Elisha has some fascinating miracles, some neat little moments.
Yeah.
But the one that always sticks with me.
Are you going for the she-bears already?
It's the one that I was told that all old youth directors hold near and dear, where, Elisha is going back to Bethel. A bunch of kids come out and call him Baldy, and Elisha calls and curses them, and a bunch of she-bears come out and eat the children.
And it's not a few, it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a whole bunch. So, how do you explain that story to children?
I don't know. I really don't, other than respect your elders.
So the I would go up. So where I grew up, church camp is churches would send a group and they would send their own counselors up, right? Which is hilarious because you don't know the camp that well, right? So I was sent up to be a counselor at Forest Home, and I think they were 3rd and 4th graders. I think we're talking about little ones for camp, right? And not big, but a black bear walked right through camp during game time. And it's like slowly wandering through camp, right? But they had everyone we all sort of went in these open pavilions, right? Just hang on the open pavilion, no loose children around. But yeah. So I hear that story and I think about I'm glad that bear just calmly kept walking through camp.
See, I'm reminded a camp story as well, where I was a counselor in a camp, and it was an adventure camp, and we went whitewater rapids and rock climbing, all that fun stuff. But we'd get back to the camp at night, and we had a cabin we were staying in. And there was a young man who had brought 20 bottles of Axe body spray.
Oh.
And one night he just decided to spray as many of them as he could.
Oh, that sounds like a horrible headache.
It was. But it set off the fire alarm. And that evening at dinner we had been warned there's been a bear spotted on camp. There's a trap set up within 100 yards of where we were staying.
And now there's a fire alarm.
And now we have to leave the building. And the closest fire department was 45 minutes away before they would let us back in.
There wasn't anywhere else you could go?
So we had the kids in one central spot, and a bunch of us just kind of
rotated
around. And the next morning there was a bear in the trap. So, that was a fun night. Bears and youth just don't mix.
No. No. Although this morning, Dash asked me if panda bears roar. I said, I don't think so. I've never heard a panda bear roar, but I don't know. You don't know either?
No.
Well, I'll have to ask Google later.
Yeah, I never thought of that. The shout out on Facebook if you know.
Have you ever heard a panda bear roar?
feel like we're going to have to find a video and post that of what noise do they make.
I've never heard them make noise. I mean, is it munching bamboo?
I don't know. But yes, Elisha and the bears. Random, weird.
It is like this little aside. It's sort of like don't mess with God's
chosen.
prophets.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he does. He has a lot. Well, and Elijah, before we leave Elijah, you know, somehow within our common view, we talk about Elijah and the fiery chariot. But he goes up in a whirlwind. The fiery chariot separates them. So, just, if you ever had that trivia question,
It's interesting.
Elijah is not taken up in a fiery chariot.
There's an artwork I'm thinking of. I don't remember the name of it, but it was like the whirlwind and Elijah was in the chariot.
In the whirlwind?
Yeah. But okay, yeah, I even missed that in this reading.
There is a fiery chariot, but it doesn't say Elijah gets in it.
Yeah.
It says a whirlwind takes him up.
Still, I mean, that had to be a beautifully terrifying sight.
Oh, yeah.
But
Yeah, it's crazy. And then the prophets want to go look for Elijah, and he tells them not to. And he's like, well, okay, go. And they don't find him. He's like, well, I told you not to go.
Good luck with that. He's not here.
Yeah. Then it's interesting. Right away, it's about water.
Mm-hmm.
And he throws salt in the water and makes it safe to drink. And it says there'll now be neither death nor miscarriage. So there was certainly some sort of parasite in the water. So that's interesting. So the bear's not the first thing Elijah does.
No, it's not.
We
but
cleanse some water first.
It's in there.
It's right there. Oh my.
And then Moab, which was at peace and now is not.
Yes. Going through it again.
Yep.
And so this is interesting, right? Because you have three kings together. You got the king of Israel, the king of Judah, and the king of Edom, which somehow are pulled together. And you know, Jehoshaphat seems to be all up for creating alliances, I have to say. It's very interesting, because this isn't the first time he's gone into battle with the king of Israel, right? Because wasn't it Ahab, and Ahab was trying to trick him and get him killed?
Yeah, it was one of the A's. I think it was Ahab.
It's one of the A's. Okay.
Because was that when Ahab died?
Yeah, that's when Ahab dies.
Yeah.
And the chariots,
Ahab
covered
killed
in
in
blood.
battle. And
Yeah.
that's back in First Kings.
So here we are again. Now we have another king of Israel, and they're all going together to fight Moab. There's no water. Now, I mean, this is not an uncommon thing in the land of Israel that there is no water.
It's almost like it's a desert. Sorry.
Okay, it is a desert. Just to be clear. So this is really interesting because, so they all go to Elisha. And Elisha's basically like, well, since Jehoshaphat is here, I guess I'll listen to you. But then it doesn't say that like a river will come. It's just that water will come in to the stream bed. So it's like this groundwater is going to rise up a little bit. And just make enough, This is one of those things growing in California. You can picture a dry stream bed.
Yeah.
And then, finding puddles in it. Like that is...
But those puddles continue to rise and grow.
Not where I grew up, but when God makes them, so, yes.
Yes. That's the visual that's given.
Right. But it's like there's this abundance of water. You still have to search for it, and there will be just enough. Yeah. But then somehow, like, the army of Moab comes up, and they see the water, and it looks like blood. That was interesting.
It's giving Exodus vibes again.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and, manna, like, there's just enough. There's just enough water. But then the water looks like blood. But it's not blood, because they can drink it safely.
But there's a tactic to that, because they think that, these three kings have fallen apart and are killing each other. We can swoop in and take advantage. And
Reasonable theory. But they're wrong.
Gideon.
I think about it all the time with Gideon and the soldiers lapping water or scooping it up. I have one child of each. I mean, seriously.
Well, but the deception
All
that
the
was.
time. You know, set their vitamins on the table, and one of them instantly picks it up. The other one's like, oh. Why would we use our hands when we don't need to touch it?
If it's of any help, there's always one in every family.
Maybe that's the thing, right? I don't know. So Elisha and these women is interesting.
Yes.
Because Elijah has similar stories.
There's almost like, I won't call them parallel, but it's going in reverse.
Yeah.
A little.
A little bit.
But yeah, you have Elisha and the widow who, oil, and that's the one where she gets all the jars and fills them to pay off her debt.
And has enough to live on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that oil that just keeps coming. So that's great. And then there's the Shunammite woman who isn't a widow, but it comes out later that she must be barren. She doesn't have any children and she's old. And so right here in this little part of 2 Kings, we get another basically miraculous birth story.
I love how all of this one plays out.
Yeah.
Because it's just, at first she provides a respite for Elisha.
Mm-hmm.
It's somewhere for him to get food, and then it becomes somewhere for him to stay. And then Elisha is ingrained in a way of trust with this family.
And she never asks for this.
She's just trying to serve.
Yeah, and Elijah declares at this season, about this time next year, she'll embrace the son. And she's like, no, don't lie to me. But she conceives and she bears a son.
Which has callbacks to Abraham and... Oh, wow, why am I forgetting? Rachel?
Isaac.
Who's Abraham? Rebecca? No.
Well, Abraham and Sarah.
Sarah. Dang it.
Isaac and Rebecca have the same sort of trouble.
Abraham and Sarah.
And then Jacob and Rachel. Leah has children, Rachel doesn't have children,
Yeah.
sorts of things. Yeah.
But that miraculous, that is by God's hand.
But then the boy he grows up, but then he gets sick. And this is also very similar. So that the widow that Elijah was with, the boy, is that where the boy falls from his horse?
Yes.
With Elijah. So he falls from his horse. And again, Elijah takes him up to the bed and lays on top of him, and he is revived. And a very similar thing happens here. But he sends his servant, right? He says, lay the staff on the face of the child, and nothing happens. So as he's traveling, all this is happening. And then he too, prays to the Lord, and then the child sneezes. And
Sorry,
yeah.
it was, the child became ill with Elijah, and that's in 1 Kings 17.
Is this the one where one of them fell from a horse, right? No?
Well, that was also Paul, and the time he preached so long someone fell asleep.
He fell out a window. Okay, this is bugging me now. Where's the widow's son in Elijah?
Chapter 17.
Oh, there we go.
Starting at verse 17.
Yeah.
Became
they just
ill,
both
and his illness
became
was
ill.
so severe that no breath was left in him.
Okay, so that's very similar. They just both got sick. And they're both healed. So Elijah and Elisha have these parallel stories.
I also love Elijah and the stew. It always makes me think of stone soup.
Yeah.
No,
Except someone brings something poisonous.
Well, why am I blanking? Carrots and something.
Potatoes, right?
No, carrots have a very similar look to something else that's poisonous.
Oh.
And I can't remember what it is off the top of my head.
Oh, no.
We learned this in scouting, where if you're ever out in the wild,
Don't eat the fat thing.
be careful about what you pick as carrots.
Find a bunny, see if they'll eat it first.
Yeah, they still eat it. You have to look for this very small, red flower in the center of the flower. And if if it's there, don't eat it. If it isn't,
Oh my.
I might have that reversed. It's been a while since I did survival
Okay,
training
I'm
with
not going to eat
Scouts.
carrots in the forest. Just not going to eat carrots in the forest.
So I mean, it's something as simple as that, thinking you brought carrots. But yeah, I get a kick out of it because it is this community gathering and then just this moment that it's
It's not so good.
right.
Oh, but also in that same story, a man comes bringing bread, the first fruits. There's 20 loaves of barley. And Elisha says, give it to the men so they can eat. And the servant says, how can I set this before 100 men? Like there's not enough, right?
Yeah.
Like the feeding of the 5,000. He says, give it to them and they'll eat and they'll have some left.
There's nothing new under the sun.
Well, it's just like when we learn that, like, when we feel like it's not enough, it's more than enough for God to use for everyone.
It goes back into that, what you said towards the beginning. It's just enough.
Well, no, here they have some left over.
Well, which
So
is still just enough, but that's
Yeah.
that miraculous extra.
Yeah.
Naaman and leprosy.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like the servants are the most interesting part of the story, maybe because I've read it a lot.
That's fair.
Yeah.
It's accurate.
But, you know, so it's Naaman's servants that convince him to do it, right? So he's like, I'm not going to go do that. That's stupid. I'm not going to go wash in the Jordan 7 times. And they're like, well, if he'd asked you to do something hard, would you have done it?
It's more commending to the faith of the servants. Yes.
And then Elisha's servant goes out basically and tries to take the reward that Naaman's offering, and then he ends up with leprosy.
Yeah.
But this also, I mean, we read this recently in Luke, right? Where Jesus, yeah, I think to the, when Jesus was in his hometown at the very beginning of Luke.
Okay.
And, you know, he reminds them that, you know, Naaman was healed from leprosy. And it's like, this is not just for you. This is for more than just the Israelites. And that's when they start to get upset. Wow, why is Luke so far back in this one? Should have brought my other book. It's so much easier. But no, it's Luke 3, right? We're going to get there, I promise.
I'm blanking on where it is in Luke.
Here it is. Rejected at Nazareth. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so he talks about Elijah was sent to none of them, but only to Zarephath in the land of Sidon, to a woman who was a widow. And there were many lepers in Israel at the time of the prophet Elijah, but none of them was cleansed, but only Naaman the Syrian. That's Luke 4, like 25 to 28. So it's also a reminder that, you know, I mean, God's gifts are for more than just God's people.
Which is a pattern he's established all the way back into, you know, the origin of creation and the work that is going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Another water thing, and that he makes iron float in water with the axe.
Which is impressive.
Yeah.
But this is a favorite of mine, the chariots of fire.
Go for it.
So you have the king of Syria, who's ready to go to war with Israel, and he's looking out at, you know, what can they do? And it was the king of, oh, wow. Sorry, I'm mixing up who's where. Anyway, Elijah prays that their eyes are open, and what they see is that God is the one standing before them. That there are these chariots of fire that is just representing all that God is going to do.
Yeah. And they're all around Elisha. You know, that like all around. Which is why I think I always like that breastplate of St. Patrick. You know, Christ before me, beside me, behind me.
Yeah,
Like, you need that all around. You need all those prepositions.
yeah, that's
All right.
where I snagged that from. Before me, with me, behind me. But that, it felt very Joshua-esque. Where, the angel, or the commander of the Lord's army shows up, and I'm not for you, I'm for the Lord, but
Here I am.
I come with terrifying force. Yeah. And I love that imagery, that
That is very powerful.
revelation that God is there whether we see him or not. Yes. So.
Oh, we still got a ways to go here in 2 Kings.
Yep. So we get some fighting. We're at least getting into the handover that goes pretty quick. Going back into the multitude of kings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they do start to, I've got a lot of questions on that. Okay, but one really interesting verse, chapter 7, verse 9.
Okay.
They said to each other, if we are not doing right, this day is a day of good news. If we are silent and wait until morning, punishment will overtake us. Let us come and go tell the king's household. That idea, like, if we keep silent, sometimes we think that's passive and it doesn't matter. But it is an action. It's just, in our culture, it's sometimes hard to say things, so we stay silent. And it's like, are we missing moments we're really supposed to live into?
That plays out with something I was thinking about in Matthew, but we'll get there.
Okay. It's
Yeah.
coming.
Yeah.
Around the corner of 1,000 Kings.
Yeah. Any of the kings jump out at you as we go through all of it? It's a lot of turnover. It's a lot of death, destruction, assassination, political intrigue, and
Yeah. Well, and it gets confusing on, wait, they're introducing a king to me. He's the king of who? He's the king of what?
and you're bouncing back and forth between the North Kingdom and the South Kingdom. So Israel being north,
Yeah.
Judah being south.
And Joram and Jehoram, that was just, Jehoram is the son of Jehoshaphat, so he's the king of Judah. And Joram is the son of Ahab, the king of Israel. But I was reading this, and they're just saying king and king without that until I got to verse 16. And in my Bible, thankfully, Joram and Jehoram are like right on top of each other. And I was like, oh, there's another letter. So it is difficult to keep the people straight. But then in the midst of that, Jehu is anointed by Elisha. Like
Who's
this
also
sort
a
of
son of
secret
Jehoshaphat,
anointing.
yeah.
Yes. And so then he conspires against Joram, which is confusing because Jehoram is the son of Jehoshaphat. I don't know.
But then that accumulates in Jehu
Yes.
and Jezebel.
Right.
Who, one book ago and multiple chapters, Ahab, who was the husband of Jezebel, dies, and she does not. It's not a pretty situation.
Well, Ahab's death wasn't pretty either. But I mean,
Yeah.
I get to this, I'm like, oh, Jezebel's still alive? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
She's kind of gotten forgotten, but there she is. And she, so she sort of gets cast out and she gets thrown down and trampled.
And eaten by the dogs, and the polite way that it's put in the Bible is the corpse of Jezebel shall be as dung on the face of the field.
So she gets no place to rest, essentially.
No. And it was, where was it? I think it's Jehu who starts clearing out all the altars and everything.
First he's got to clear all Ahab's sons. So chapter 10, Ahab had 70 sons in Samaria.
It's a lot of murder.
Yeah. So he writes them all letters. And is he the one that, basically he tricks the prophets of Baal?
Yeah, which is hilarious.
So he calls them all and says, we're going to have this big time to worship Baal. And he gathers all the priests and he calls for all the people that worship Baal to get in there. And then he basically surrounds them with the army and says, don't let anyone come out.
Yeah. And then where he slaughters them all, and they demolished the pillar of Baal and demolished the house of Baal and made it a latrine.
Junior highers would love this.
That was what I was reading this through with on. Wow, that's 2 chapters of pretty intense moments and some pretty severe curses.
So what we get, though, in chapter 10:31, which is very helpful, Jehu was not careful to walk in the law of the Lord and the God of Israel with all his heart. So, he does these good things, but yet again, he's missing it just a little bit.
Which is the theme with all of the kingdoms.
And so God begins to cut off and create this separation with parts of Israel from the Jordan eastward.
Yeah.
So we're starting to have even more split and separation.
Well, and this is lining us up for what is the coming exile.
Yeah, and I'm like, we're getting near the, we're going to enter the second half of Kings here, so it's not going to take too long.
Yeah. It's right around the corner. The generations are faltering. In big and little ways, they keep forgetting God in their acts of worship, in their community. And exile is this uncomfortable purge.
But see, then again, so near the end of chapter 11, and Jehoiada, which is a totally different person, made a covenant between the Lord and the king and people that they should be the Lord's people, and also between the king and the people. Then all the people of the land went to the house of Baal and tore it down. And tore down his altars and his images they broke in pieces. And they killed the priest of Baal before the altars. So, all this happens again, but yet...
Well, I think that's part of what is the beauty that is how Matthew opens with the genealogy. Mm-hmm. Where even in the darkest moments, there's this spark that will continue. And it happens. It's hard to see as you're going through a lot of murder.
No, you gotta watch those words real quickly. Like, wait, he did walk in the ways of the Lord, or he didn't, or he almost did? Like, where are we at?
He got some things right and a lot of things wrong.
Well, but okay. I mean, we're almost through. Let's just jump real quick. Because the Sermon on the Mount... Oh, that's not the right bookmark. Because the Sermon on the Mount, hear...
that wraps up Kings.
Okay, great.
And Chronicles is a lot of rehashing of all of that. So do you just want to jump into Matthew?
I do.
Okay, let's go to Matthew.
Because this fits so well, right? Like, even in the midst of all of this... Jesus, in the midst of the Sermon on the Mount, talks about how... Where is it? It's in 6 or 7, and it shouldn't be that hard to find. Oh, maybe because it's a little earlier. Yes. So, even while Jesus is saying this, he's like, I did not come to abolish the law or the prophets, but to fulfill them. Not one iota will pass away, which is like the smallest letter in Greek, from the law until it's all accomplished. And whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you'll never enter the kingdom of heaven. So like this idea of walking in God's ways, or sort of walking in God's ways, is still a huge part of this word God's giving us.
Feels very Romans 7 or 1 through 7
I think
esque.
we're going to go back to Romans.
It also helps that my kids have been asking a lot of questions out of that. But all right, so here's a question for you that I was thinking about with the Sermon on the Mount.
Yep.
And what is Matthew 5, 6, kind of 7.
Yep.
When was the first time you read it and connected? Because this is a big chunk of living in faith, living in and following in the footsteps of Christ.
I remember high school, I remember reading it, and I feel like someone tried to challenge us to memorize it, which I did not do. Summer might have, or maybe Summer was memorizing it. And that was when I sort of started to wrestle with this and try to grasp it. And there's so many different parts of the Sermon on the Mount. That it's really not just one thing. I mean, it has some of my favorite things.
It's got a lot of pieces that we pull out.
Yes.
All the
we
time.
pull out the Beatitudes.
Blessed are.
Yes. And it turns things upside down, right? Like the values of God's kingdom are very clearly different than ours.
Well, and it is the portrait of the upside down kingdom. It's...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know, kind of interesting to read the day after Election Day, it's just... Like, what do we vote for? We vote for what we think will benefit us. I don't know. All right, let's just move on real quick from that. Let's pretend I didn't say that out loud.
But it's a blessing as a reminder, though. No matter what we vote for, this is what we're trying to live into. Flawed and whole and imperfect. But I was 19. I remember reading the end of Matthew 6, not being anxious.
The do not worry part.
Yeah.
Love that part. It's so beautiful.
And just how deeply that connected. Just, that young adult transition and everything's on fire in this crisis. And just, wow, wait a minute, it is not. And going back and reading Matthew 5. And it's always been, I cling to it in that way because there's a lot to grow into.
Yeah, that do not worry passage, do not be anxious. Matthew 6:25 through 34. The imagery in it is so beautiful. And it reminds you, it pulls you back to creation. Look at the birds of the air. Look at the lilies of the field. God is still caring and sustaining this world, and you too, of course, will be sustained in it.
And this idea of a golden age and Solomon. And it doesn't even compare to the riches that God has in store, to the beauty that he has in store for us. With just a little bit of faith.
Yeah, it's such beautiful imagery that I really think helps us reconnect in a way we really need to.
Yes.
So in a lot of these things in the Sermon on the Mount, there's this whole passage of, you've heard that it was said, but this is what I say. And this isn't a reversal. It's a shifting of how we think of it. Because it's not a letter of the law, it's the spirit of the thing. And so it's shall not murder, and then those who are, even if you don't do it, angry enough with your brother, are still liable for judgment. So those things, and about adultery, and about, divorce, and about swearing falsely, and an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, which leads into a total, lots of stuff's been written about that. But it's also trying to, when Jesus is talking about turn the other cheek and give your cloak and go too, he's trying to reestablish that the person who's, commanding you to do these things, you are reestablishing your right to have a say in that. So it's actually trying to even the field between one another. So there's a lot in it. I mean, you have prayer, you have fasting, you have building things up on earth instead of heaven.
It's 2.5 chapters, 5, 6, and a good chunk of 7 that really are should be held as a core. Should be held as what we need to continually
Isn't it
grow
all
into.
of 7?
I start drawing a line at 7:24 because it is a conclusion. It makes sense, and then 28 is just.
Well, that's the end, right? Jesus finished saying these things, and the crowd was astonished. No?
I'll go back into the main meat of the thing, not the benediction. It's good benediction. But loop back to 5. Sorry, that's where I end up at it.
So, nope, that wasn't it. There was something else that really stood out to me. Yes, so when Jesus starts, he begins to preach before the Sermon on the Mount. He's just preaching in the Galilee, I think.
Right before it's he's
17.
in Decapolis.
Yes, 4:17. Jesus begins to preach, saying, "Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand." And he's picking up the exact same message John has in chapter 3.
Yes.
Verse 2. Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand.
It's a continuation.
Yeah, but he's like picking it. It's like passing the baton. Like he's picking it up and he's gonna keep going with it. Yeah. And the baptism of Jesus, when God said, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I'm well pleased." I'm like, oh, I'm pretty sure God says the exact same thing in the Transfiguration.
It's pretty close to it.
Hold on, I'm looking. I didn't look before. Yep. 17:5. This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. So yeah, it's the same thing. It just adds "listen to him" in the Transfiguration.
Mm.
We're jumping all over the place. We also have the temptations,
Yes.
which connect in Matthew very strongly to Exodus, to the temptations in the wilderness.
And, instead of 40 years, it's 40 days. And
Right.
the hunger, the thirst, the desire for power.
Yeah. But he fasts for 40 days and 40 nights. And then the tempter comes and says these things. I don't know. The tense could be taken either way.
I love how the temptation of Christ ends, just with verse 11. Then the devil left him, and behold, the angels came and were ministering to him.
Which reminds me of Elijah in the wilderness, when the angels came and attended him. It's kind of beautiful.
Yeah, just this grace and care that is the kingdom.
Yeah.
But this is the beginning. Jesus is about to begin his journey all across what is that part of the world, establishing a different. Different's not the right word. Different pace. So different does work.
Yeah, and a lot starts to happen really fast. I mean, since we're recording a day late, I went ahead and read chapter 8.
Mm.
And Jesus comes down. And this is the first specific miracle we get in Matthew. There were some general, everyone who came was healed, and they brought people. But a leper comes. And he says, "Lord, if you will, you can make me clean." And just like in Luke, Jesus stretches out his hand and touches him, saying, "I will be clean." So the cleansing comes in the touch. It almost seems like.
See, now that's interesting because it's the next story that I love.
Yeah.
The faith of the centurion.
Right. And, this is where a reminder that these gospels, we call them synoptic gospels for a reason.
Right.
A lot of these are in Luke. Synoptic means seeing together. Matthew, Mark, and Luke have such a huge overlap with these stories, and they're very similar. And that gives us this huge base for the ministry of Jesus.
That is interesting, the contrast you have between the two of the cleansing of the leper, that it sounds like the person is a part of the Jewish community, but set apart because of the leprosy. And then the centurion who is not. They are the political other and the Gentile. But in that same way, the faith of the centurion in seeking Jesus and asking brings healing.
Well, and in this one, Luke adds in how the centurion asks the priests to go intercede for him with Jesus. I know them. Go talk to him for me. And they said, you should do this. He is very helpful for us. But here it's just the centurion and Jesus. And yes, that proclamation of faith, and that he believes even if you say it will be, it will be.
Which is it's that beautiful contrast, though. This is what the kingdom is being established as.
Yeah.
It is for all. And you have more of healings that begin to happen, and people are beginning to follow.
Yeah. And you have that cost of following Jesus. They said, let me first go bury my father. Let me first go doing this. And he said, follow me, and leave it. Let it go. And so they get in the boat, and it's funny, we don't know, right? This one, Jesus said, follow me and leave. I don't know if he's included, but they get in the boat, and then there's this great storm, which you just had the youth, share with us on Youth Sunday.
Out of Luke.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very similar. And there's that great calm, right?
And that feels, again, Elijah in the cave, which also draws me to Isaiah, and I am unmade in the silence. Like there's a degree of that would be amazing and terrifying all at once. Of just that calm.
Yeah. Like there is that on the water, that just everything is calm.
Mm.
And it's okay, even though you don't really have any control on the water, right?
Well, and to have just been in a storm that is swamping you. And then peace.
And the relief of it.
Mm.
And then similar, the last one in chapter 8 is very similar to Luke 8. I mean, interesting though, in Matthew 8, he's really just starting his ministry. In Luke 8, he's like right in the center.
Which you
Different
had
patterning.
You just preached on.
Yeah. And so, it's very similar, except here there's 2 demon-possessed men that come out of the tombs. And again, the demons are sent into the pigs, not the sheep. So it's Gentile area. And they go drown, the herdsmen go and tell people what happened, and they come out to meet Jesus. But we don't get in Matthew that beautiful part we got in Luke, where the man is sitting, clothed,
Sane.
right by Jesus.
And he wants to follow Jesus in that Luke passage.
Right. So what we're left with here is the people beg Jesus to leave. That's it. We don't have that other weaving in of Luke, which makes you wonder, like, when Luke was writing, did he travel there? Did he find the man? Did he get to hear some of the story in his perspective?
See, I think he must have, because that's the part I love about Luke's piece of this story, because it's that seed that is planted for after Jesus' death and resurrection.
Yeah.
That now the ministry is happening to the Gentiles. Now the disciples are going out into the farthest stretches of the known world.
Yeah.
And already before them is the seed that Christ set there. Don't follow me. Give it a couple years. It's going to be important.
Yeah. And it should remind us that people who beg us not to talk about Jesus, You never know what impact God's love has on people.
Or how long it will take.
Yeah. But God is not giving up on them.
No. God doesn't give up on us.
That's a miracle in itself.
It's a hope.
It's more than a hope.
But, sorry, there are people I look at and I go, that's the hope I cling to for them. That God doesn't give up on us.
Yeah.
It may not be for me, but God is for all and is working.
Amen.
Amen.
So this is, we didn't even say, which week are we in? This is the wrong bookmark.
Yeah, week 30.
Week 30. So that's in the midst of week 30. It is nice to be going through Matthew. And oh my goodness, we're going to finish. No, wait. They're going to start weaving the prophets into kings.
Yeah.
Oh, it's going to be hard. Okay, we're going to do it though. We're going to be okay.
Normally it's Leviticus, but it has been Kings and Chronicles that is just... Ouch.
All right. We need to get a chart. Are you going to get a chart for us that has the kings of Israel and Judah and the prophets?
Yes, and
Thank you.
I'll erase the whiteboard and turn it into the murder board.
No. I thought you could make a nice chart for us and stick it on that bulletin board you have outside the CE wing.
That's Perry.
Oh, really?
Yep.
It has a lot of the Bible in the Year stuff on it.
That's Perry.
Well, maybe she'd be okay if we put one of these charts on there.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, in between kings and prophets and Sermon on the Mount and healing stories, remember that God does not give up on any of us. May God bless you in this week. Amen.
Amen.
I love my B-I-B-I.